Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Are you perhaps starving for a heaping, helping, serving of Black collegiate sports? Well, sometimes you can get some of it during the football season, but to really see your HBCU teams and get information, it requires a lot of digging, a lot of searching. And with all of that, sometimes you just don't get the results that you want. Well, that is changing. And tonight we are talking about a new free digital streaming platform focusing on historically Black colleges and universities. It's called HBCU Go. And it actually isn't just about sports. It really is about, as they say, doing it for the culture. Tonight, my guest is Curtis Simons, president and co-founder of HBCU Go. Curtis, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Harold, it's an honor and a pleasure, man. And, I've been a strong follower of WHUR on your show. Kind of grew up in the D.C. area now. I was former BET guy for 14 years, so I know what HUR means to our community, and I appreciate what you're doing for HBCU Go. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And from the looks of it, I've had a chance to actually go on the website, go on the streaming platform, and I can only imagine what this has the potential to mean for the Black community, and not just the HBCU community, but the broader Black community. Talk to me about the genesis of this. How did this come about?
Well, Harold, it came about actually years ago, but I kind of put it in place about 12 years ago. I mean, I'm a baby of an HBCU. I actually grew up on the campus of Central State University. My mother taught there for 40 years. My father worked there for 50 years. I was born in Bermuda. And so I graduated from Central State. So did my mother, so did my wife, so did my brother-in-law, and my sister. And so it was a bloodline that historical Black colleges meant to me, because I saw what my mother had did as a PE teacher in really teaching young African-American men and women about themselves and how to really respect life and respect their parents and be a better person when they leave. And it was something I truly admired when I look back on it and said, I've had over here probably like 40 some plus years in the media business with my experience at ESPN for 8 years, BET for 14 years. But I felt there was something missing in giving HBCUs the exposure of, making more people aware of what it's all about being at an HBCU. And I think the driving point for me, Harold, I live in Fairfax, Virginia now. I've been here for almost 40 years. But the driving point for me is when you go out and you see a sprinkle of African-American kids playing sports, and you ask them, or others, not just sports, but other things, you ask them, hey, what about, what do you think about going to college? And 90% of them said, would not go to an HBCU. And I couldn't understand it. And that kind of gave me the forethinking that I need to create something that starts educating more people about the history, the value, the legacy of HBCUs. So I put together a plan about 12 years with my business partner, Clint Evans, and we went to the street to try to get someone to bite the bullet on it and look at what we're doing. And because I had so many years in the cable industry, the first place I went was the cable industry. And I went out to I went and talked to a buddy of mine that was very big with TCI, which is one of the big cable operators back in the day, and said to him, hey, I got this idea. Why don't you partner with me on this idea? And he said, Curtis, you need to take this over here to Comcast and see if Comcast, who is now the big dog of all the big cable systems, would maybe buy into it because they have all the major distribution. So I sat down with Comcast one day and pitched them on the idea. And they gave me about 30 minutes of time. And then they said, Harold, you know what? Hey, Curtis, we get it. Let us kind of move it around the offices and see just where it goes. So I figured I'd get the standard out answer, like, hey, we're not interested.
No thanks.
Right, exactly. But it was opposite. But I got a call back saying that they were interested in the channel. They wanted to give me a 20-year deal. and start off with like 3 to 5 million subscribers, which I was like jumping for joy because this was like 10 years ago, and the market was tight on launching new services. And one who had been involved so deeply with BT, I knew what it took to try to drive the business. So I looked at it like, oh man, this is a great opportunity. So we began to start the process of doing a linear channel. And we got down about 6 months into the game. And then all of a sudden, Comcast bought NBC Universal. And the world changed on me. And they came back, and said, Curtis, we can't do the deal now. We just bought NBC Universal. And as I was talking to the guy that was talking to me, the contract was coming through my fax at the same time of my deal with them. So I was a little confused. And after a few different conversations, things didn't work out. So I just got to the street and said, well, what is the better way to do this? I said, well, we can't do linear. Maybe the new world is digital. Maybe we go out there. So I ended up doing, me and my partner were able to raise some small funds, and we got something started on the digital side. We built a website. We got some programming out there. We started kind of building a little bit of a brand with Hbcugo at the time. But we just couldn't get anybody to really nestle down on it. And everybody who knew me was like, man, why don't you give this up? This is not going to work. We know you get blood, sweat, and tears, but it's not going to work. But anyway, out the blue one day, a friend of Byron Allen's called me and said, Curtis, have you talked to Byron Allen lately? I said,
yeah,
no.
the media mogul, Byron Allen. Yeah.
You got it. He said, man, this guy just gave you a major endorsement of, what you're doing. So I called Byron the next day and thanked him. And then right behind that, I got another call.
Just like that. You just called Byron. Just like, yeah, right. Just like, well, I just called Byron, and that's just like me saying, yeah, I just called Oprah or Tyler Perry, and
I hear you. I hear you. So Byron's right-hand person called me and said, Curtis, let me send you what Byron said. So she sends it over to me and tells me where to look at it. I pick it up, and the lady says to him, well, Byron, why are you suing Comcast for $20 billion? And he said, you want the real answer? She said, yeah. She said, he said, a friend of mine by the name of Curtis Simons was trying to do an HBCU channel, and they wouldn't give him a nod on it. And I thought it was the right thing to do. And that kind of really pissed me off. So I thought that Harold, it was just a good nature. He was in the flow. So I sent him a little note saying, hey, man, thanks a lot. About 2 months later, he's on the Breakfast Club in Atlanta. He asked him the same question. He gives him the same answer. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, he must have some interest here. So I called him. I said, Byron, we need to talk. And so he was closing out on the deal with Comcast. He said, Kurt, let me finish up the deal with Comcast, see what happens, and let me get back to you. So about 3 or 4 months ago later, he ends up getting a large distribution deal for Allen Media Group. And so I called him and he says, well, Curtis, what do you need? I said, I need an investor. I said, I need somebody to put some money into the channel. You know how hard it is out here now to get money today, to get capital, Harold. So he said, I don't invest, I buy. I said, what? He said, yeah, I buy. He said, why don't you put a business plan together? Let's talk about it and let's see where we go. I put a business plan together with my partner. We got back to Byron. He looked at it and he just gave me a quick answer. He said, Curtis, I think you're doing the right thing in this historical Black college atmosphere. I want to buy your channel. And so that was my start, Harold. That got me in the door. He's gotten behind me. And the first thing he said to me when I came on board, he said, well, the way in which we got to do this business, the business plan, Curtis, because Hbcugo is a channel built around not just sports. It's built around the lifestyle. It's built around the education style. It's built around anything focused around the HBCU climate. But he said, which made sense. He said, look, in order to drive the business, the first thing we need to do is capture all the sports feeds, because Black college sports is really what's been known for at HBCUs. So he put me on the journey, and I was able to lock down the SWAC for 10 years. I was able to lock down the CIAA for 10 years, and I was able to lock down the SIAC for 10 years. So I now have 3 out of the 4 major conferences in for 10 years underneath HBCUgo sports. And we're working on, the MEAC. I'm hoping we'll get that, which includes Howard in 25. So I'm working very hard at that. So we really came out the gates really kind of really showcasing Black college sports.
Yeah.
And the first thing I said to him, go ahead, Harold.
I was going to say that we are talking to Curtis Simons, president and co-founder of the digital streaming platform HBCU Go. A fascinating conversation, a platform that is not just opening up sports, Black sports at HBCUs, but so much more. Curtis, I do want to talk a little bit more about that because, as I said in the beginning of the conversation, there is in the culture, there is so much interest in black sports, collegiate sports at HBCUs, and not just the games, but certainly the personalities. And it took a really, really long time, even before HBCU Go has come to this point, for those of us in the culture who wanted to find out what was happening with Alcorn State or Morgan State or Howard University, and and the like. And as I said in the very beginning, even as you look, sometimes you don't find everything in the same place. And sometimes the information you get, did my team win? Did St. Aug win?
Right.
Did FAMU win? You get it by word of mouth because you had to call your boy who went to FAMU and who still lives in Tallahassee, because you couldn't find that information. And obviously, and this is just between you and me and the rest of the Black folks.
I like that.
But we know there's a market for it.
Yes.
But when you talked about that kind of inside baseball business plan stuff, how did you know that this was going to be something that people really wanted to see beyond thinking it was just a novelty?
Well, I think Harold, let's rewind to your point. I was able to be on the ground floor of BET. When I came to BET in 1988, Bob was putting Black college sports on 2-week delay. I said, Bob, we can't have, no one's watching. No one wants to know news 2 weeks. Sports got to be live sports on time, letting people know what's happening today. So that was the beginning. I was able to crank BET and doing live sports. And we were really jumping around with all the conferences at that time. The problem was, to your point on sports, Harold, was that we were too early. The advertisers didn't really understand Black college sports at that time. So we were losing a lot of money trying to do these games. And I couldn't stop Bob when he said, after like 4 or 5 years, Curtis, we can't do this no more. We're losing too much between production. And so not only did we hurt the community, but we also hurt the universities because they depended on us as a network. And so, that's where I think that the mecca of Black college sports kind of took a dip, because really wasn't anyone putting any kind of television around it. Now, support came in the way of ESPN. ESPN said, look,
hold that point, because I do want to talk about that on the other side, but I need to take a really, really quick break.
No problem.
We're going to take that break, and don't forget, you can hear this and see every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, our website. The original Quiet Storm with John Mons is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation tonight with Curtis Simons, president and co-founder of the new digital streaming platform HBCU Go. Curtis, before the break, you were saying kind of the auspices of that transition was was ESPN. Go ahead and finish your point about that.
Yeah, ESPN came in at a great time and really kind of started to give the HBCUs the beginning of some exposure. But they didn't really know what they had because they were doing so much sports. It was just kind of over in the corner, but they were still being able to check in the box off and saying, hey, we've got some black college sports coming here.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to try to do, what we've been now moving in the direction, Harold, is building a true destination. That's where most people are looking for black college sports now, a destination. And so HBCUgo is now driving. People know come August 24th that they can come on HBCUgo between the Griot and our syndication business and see us. We have a game at 1 o'clock. We have a game at 3 o'clock. We have a doubleheader every Saturday all the way up through November now, in football. Same way in basketball. So the key for us was building that destination and making more people know they didn't have to fumble through their channel box to try to figure out where you go. Now, we continue to just drive that message. And one of your points that you made earlier is really what we're building on it around. It's building around the culture, making people understand the culture of what it's all about to be at an HBCU, what it's about to be on the campus of an HBCU, what it's about to really see what the bands do and all the pregame stuff and post-game stuff. That's a lot of the culture that we're doing with HBCUgo. And one of the other beauties of it, Harold, is that we have a tremendous syndicated television broadcast group who has gone out now and hooked us in with the CWs of the world, the Foxes of the world, the CBSs of the world, the O&Os, to where we're at 77% of television households, Harold, on Saturday, seeing our games, along with being in 85% of African-American households. That's a big number, and you look at this year, we just added an O&O, the big Fox station in LA. We added another big O&O in Chicago, big Fox station in Chicago. We've got some top markets across the country. And
let me stop you there for our listeners and viewers. For those who aren't familiar, O&O means owned and operated television stations. So, for example, when I was a news anchor in Columbus, Ohio, the station that I worked for was not just an NBC affiliate. It was owned by NBC. Just want to make sure we help the folks with the alphabet soup. But
thank you, Harold, for doing that. Because what I'm just trying to make my point on is that it opened up more doors for, as I'm saying, the same way I saw it at BET, the crossover of people who are now watching. It's not just African Americans just watching HBCUgo. It's a crossover of people who are watching because they want to watch good sports. One of the things that I talked about when I was at BET is that you never just bought black entertainment television, you have programming. And we're doing the same thing with HBCUgo. We're providing good programming. That's really what you're looking for. And so now by building that destination, it opens up more doors now to be able to show more of the lifestyle programming, educational programming. And one of the other things that we're adding to it, hopefully in 25, Harold, is not just football, basketball. We're out showing all sports, from the baseball to softball to golf, and giving people a true flavor of all the activities that go on in HBCU campus and opportunities that their young people who are looking to go to college, who are good athletes or good students, have an opportunity to be part of. And that's the door that we're trying to open up.
So let me ask you about this, because as I said, this is a free digital platform. I mean, if you just go to HBCUgo, I was checking it out today and I could see everything, for free. But one of the difficulties is when we talk about the business side of it, and that, for example, Black News Network, which burned quite hot, and then it burned out in 2022. And as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Byron Allen had a hand in buying it after it went into to bankruptcy.
Right.
How the promise of an HBCUgo is great, but for those fans who are, sports is great because everybody loves sports.
Sure.
But how How do you guarantee that this also is not going to burn so hot and then flare out?
Well, I think number one, you have to have a strong supporter like a Byron Allen, the CEO of this company, who is saying, "I'm in it for the long haul," and you've
Mm.
got to grow it. And then what we put together slowly but surely is, the only way you're successful is, as you said earlier, we're a free service. But one of the other areas that we've really done a great job of and begin to grow is the advertising side of the business. And we are slowly but surely really growing a nice advertising side that has really been the main driver of support of HBCU Go. And if we can continue to grow, I mean, you've been around the circuit as long as I have, Harold, and you know that when you get a good product going, people come. And I
Mhm.
think that the George Floyd years ago, unfortunately, he had to pay the price to make the world look at us differently. But in the same vein, it made us made them rather understand that they have to support us in a bigger way. And
Mhm.
so that's one of the things that Byron has really echoed in supporting Black-owned media. Very similar to you are at HUR. Is trying to get more dollars out of these advertisers, and we're slowly but surely squeaking some good dollars that will hopefully continue to make us successful down the road.
The outside of sports, one of the things that is on the site, as I mentioned, you mentioned culture, certainly, lifestyle, and as well as, education. Are you concerned about need that you may have to compete with BET, which is no longer, obviously, and hasn't been for quite some time, owned by Bob Johnson?
Right,
It is not a black owned company
right.
anymore. How are you going to compete against the BET?
Well, I mean, BT is focused more on the entertainment side. I mean, that's what people grew up on, um, and we're focused more on the universities. And
Mhm.
what are the universities? I mean, one of the things that we want to try to do, Harold, that hopefully within the next, I would give us, give me a year or two to really get it going right. But there are many stories, untold stories coming out of HBCUs, Harold. I mean, if you go around each and every HBCU, there is one story out of each one that no one's ever heard about, and no one's ever talked about, that if they had the opportunity to really open the doors up and really talk about it, people would get a true education on what these universities meant and why they're here. And so one of the things that we're going to separate ourselves is being more of a storytelling channel that talks about the history of some of these universities. We're also going to give the students an opportunity to program stuff for the network. We're not. This isn't a one-sided show here. You have some great young journalism, great filmmakers that are out here that we want to try to partner with down the road, that we can create some programming that can fit in our HBCU circle, that gives these young people a door to open so that they can grow in the business that they're trying to go. Because one of the problems that you have in the HBCU circle is a lot of students don't know where to go. They just don't know where to go. And unfortunately, if you're in journalism and broadcast, you have a tough time knowing what door to open because you're just not sitting in that seat, to know that. So we want to begin to try to help those students begin to try to open those doors. So our goal is to help them create programs together, look at driving ways in which we can partner with them. And then the other thing too, I think, one of the things I was fortunate to do when I was at BT, and I want to try to mirror going into with HbcuGo, Harold, is also partnering with some big brands, like the NFL, like Major League Baseball, like NBA, so that they can see how we can partner to open more doors to try to drive more programming, because they're all trying to reach our audience in different ways.
Mhm.
But
You
if
know,
we can
one,
be of assistance to that.
one of the things, and you kind of touched on this when you first were, talking about, the BET, and for people of a certain age, and you certainly have been around long enough to remember that the best Black football players, for example,
Sure.
were not at PWIs. They
No.
came out of HBCUs.
Exactly.
And it was like that for a long time. The NFL was able to pluck them out of HBCUs and their performance.
Right.
Ironically, once all of a sudden the Division I PWI schools began to notice that HBCUs were producing stellar players,
Right.
and that's when the transition began, when you had these great high school football players, Black high school football players. They were then beginning to go to PWI Division I NCAA schools. And so I think it's ironic that that a Comcast, for example, was not ready when you were ready for this. It seems like things have kind of come full circle. But I say all that because even during this last NFL draft, which I think I watched the first day, there was no one coming from an HBCU.
No.
That's heartbreaking for the culture.
Yes.
For our community.
No question.
And so quite possibly this channel may provide some balance and give some of the scouts, for example, an opportunity to see what is available, because honestly, most of them are paying attention to the Division I schools.
Right. I think you're right on point on that, Harold, because I think it's an embarrassment that you look at the number of schools out there and the number of athletes, and you couldn't get one player drafted in the NFL. Not one player. To me, that's totally an embarrassment. And though you still say out here as an establishment, we want to get more minorities in the business, and you have to look in the mirror and say, really, well, how do you skip almost 300 plus players and not one? And so, HBCUgo's challenge is to open up that door so that you no longer can say, I don't have a quality person here, because you're seeing them every Saturday. So, there's no way you can say you're not seeing enough of it at the end of the day.
But how are you going to pick which teams, which games to show on any given Saturday?
Well, that's always, you have two things happening for us, Harold, that we're doing right now. Number one is that I put together with my team in January what I call the Commissioners Tour. And the Commissioners Tour was where we went and sat down with each commissioner from each conference, the SWAC, CIAA, SISC. The goal of that meeting, Harold, was to really sit down and try to get some feedback from them on how they thought the season went. We're going into season 3. How things were going, the good, the bad. Number two was also to talk to them about, we had been in the first 2 years, we had basically been scheduling, off of what we thought. So we were saying, let's sit down with you and you tell us the better games, because the way the picking goes right now, Harold, is that ESPN still has a contract with all these conferences. So they have the first pick of games. So once they finish their pick of games, then we get to come in. And so they're only going to take a selective amount of games. And so they leave us out a pretty nice pool of games. But this year we got smarter to sit down with the conference commissioners and their teams and really work out the games that they thought this year would be some top games. So the first time we're doing 6 homecoming games, which is unheard of. No one's done 6 homecoming games, and that's mixed between the SWAC, the MEAC, and CIAA. We have the CIAA football championship game in November. So we're slowly crawling in. And then secondly, Harold, where we're going is that majority of these conferences have college-produced games. What we're working on in 25, moving forward to 26, is being able to open up a door where those games can now lay on our platform somewhere. So we're working on some channels that we create that we can feed those games we don't put on syndication or cable. We now can put on another fast channel, whatever, to get as many games out there as we can. So that's really that's our growth move that we're trying to put in place. So we hope to try to have a plethora of games out there. Right now, going into this year, we'll have 26 games, between our syndicated schedule and our cable schedule, which is a lot of games at the end of the day, doubleheaders every weekend. And what we were looking for
go ahead.
Let me just finish up real quick. What we were looking for is, let's get the best rivalries. Okay. Like, for example, our September 7th game, we've had Tuskegee at Grambling. That's a rivalry that's been there for over years. It's a big time game, that we have on our network. We also have the Arkansas Pine Bluff at Alcorn State. Alabama State, I'm sorry. And Alabama State is one of the top teams this year. They have their homecoming. So we're trying to get the best matchups this year. We're not going to be perfect because ESPN has their first choice. We have the second choice. But I think our lineup is going to be pretty strong at the end of the day. And then as we grow, to your point, the goal is to add more games that will be caught. Now, one of the things that we've talked to each commissioner about is that we have to have quality of games that you give us as those college-produced games. It can't be YouTube type games. They got to be the same type quality that we're putting. Because one of the things I give Byron 150% is that when I told him in the first year, I said, Byron, I got one shot to make this network look good. If I don't make it look good coming out the gates, my audience is going to say, I'm gone. Okay. And I got to tell you, Harold, we did all 4 media days in this month of July, and we got great feedback from coaches and the commissioners on the quality of our production. Saying they match us up against anybody.
And that's really, that really is important because as we know, if it doesn't look good, it stinks if it doesn't look good. And I think on the biggest things that makes us more powerful is that I have a legend, Charlie Neal, one of the greatest black broadcasters in the sports business. He's the John Madden of black college sports. Charlie can go back to 1960 and tell you about me and your father played when he was broadcasting and give you the history. And he brings that knowledge to the table that people really appreciate. People normal telecasts don't give you what Charlie brings to the table. And his counterpart, John Kelly, is just as strong. John comes out of Chicago and he's just as strong. And then on our cable side, I got a Hall of Famer. I got Anton Bethea, who played at Howard, won a Super Bowl, on that side, along with James Hadnot, and those two partner up, and they've done a great job. And then we've got 2 great sideline young ladies. I have Nina Simone as one of them, and Laurencia Morton. I always mess with Laurencia's name up. And her father is a famous basketball player. He came out of Carroll High School out of our backyard. Who was an unbelievable ball player back in the day at Syracuse. So we have people who know the game and understand the game, talking about the game here. And that's really a major point for me, in educating my audience. So speaking of history and history in the making, even though we're mostly talking about sports, as you very well know, we are in an historic political year. Yes. And we have Kamala Harris, who is the presumptive Democratic, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. But more than that, like you said, when you talk about doing it for the culture, immersing oneself in the culture, we are talking about someone who graduated from an HBCU,
no question,
who is an AKA, according to the meme, puts hot sauce on her greens. And so, and while we've been mostly talking about sports, what are the chances that HBCU Go would enter into, the news, the news realm? It seems to me that this is a perfect opportunity. We may not see the likes of this kind of situation again, because the last time we saw something like this was in 2008 when Barack Obama first ran for president, and he did not attend an HBCU. This is a completely different kind of situation.
Well, I got to tell you, what our planning is going to be, Harold, is that the Griot channel, which is our linear channel, which was Byron, you talked about the Black News Network being bought out. That was the linear channel that now we flipped to the Griot channel. We're going to partner together and create a vote campaign that's going to roll out very soon in support of the election and trying to get our young people, get our young people out and make sure we have people registered to vote, across the board, because as you just mentioned, it's a very, very important election. And it's not one that we are going to be looking very lightly about. I mean, it's going to be one that we're going to be pushing. You got to get out and vote. You got to make a difference. You've got to get to that ballot and make sure your ballot means something. You can't talk about it unless you do something about it. And so I think as far as the Griot and HBCU Go, you'll see some big messaging out there about coming out and voting. And we did an interview that we're doing a preview show on Black College Sports, comes out August 24th. I don't have a time yet, unfortunately, because we're in the mix to get it. But, we did an interview with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who also graduated from Central State, and she's my, Ohio congressperson. And she talks about getting out to vote, which hopefully that some of that piece will be in this preview show. And it will mean a lot now that Carmelo's out there. It'd be a lot, So we hope to have some messaging out there, to your point, Harold, that will not just be centered around sports, but also around getting out to vote and making sure that our young people understand this year is critical. And it's not one that none of us can look past. All of us have to be into it as a village, because, the famous words is, you got a village around you, think change. And that's what we have to show to our vice president, that we got to put that village around it to make this happen.
One of the other things outside of the sports realm and even outside of the politics, you have this thing called, the color of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And for the culture, obviously there have been Black people who have been deeply involved in STEM for decades and decades and decades, long before that term obviously came up. There was a big push under the Obama administration to make that part of the public square, the town square conversation. And now it's not just a thing for nerds, even though I always believe nerds rule the world. But now it is cool. It is hip. It is it is a thing to be a rocket science. How much more do you believe the stories about STEM culture for Black people will be or continue to be a part of HBCU Go?
Well, it's going to be a big part down the road for us. There was a gentleman who has, unfortunately, my name is Curtis Simons. My EVP of programming, his name is Kurt Simmons, and we worked together for many years at BET.
That could be confusing.
Another friend of his created a show called Color of STEM. That they've created a really good programming concept with that we hope to really grow on HBCU Go. One of the things that I had an interesting conversation, Harold, a while back that I'm working on with a a high school teacher in the area in Maryland who looked at our website and said, Curtis, you're doing a great job with this network. I love what you're doing, but one piece that you're missing here, you don't have an education page tied to your website.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? You're exactly right. So she got together with another friend of mine and got us started. You know, our goal in 25, Harold, is to create an educational page tied to our website that will talk not only about color STEM, but talk about the whole education concept and the windows of things, the opportunities that we'll be bringing to light. And what we want to try to do, I've already had several companies that want to tie in around the STEM concept, also want to tie in around, you know, job opportunities, because the famous word out there is, I can't find good enough minorities to hire, you know, which I think is the garbage line, but that's just the typical thing you hear every day. So we want to spend some time opening up those doors. And STEM is a major player because it's now, you know, it's so big in the middle schools and high schools now. These our young folks, my line is this, Harold. If you put an African-American kid out there in a game situation, because we're so visual, we would just walk right over anybody else. But now, if you put a book in front of us, that's where we got the headache, because we don't read we're not pushed to read as consistent as our counterparts. So that's our struggle, trying to catch up all the time. But as far as the visual side of it, we get it like that. And we're so powerful with that. That's the thing that if you see now, you see more and more young people who are doing coding. You see more young people who are really understanding more about the circuit, the cable, the whole 9 yards. They can speak that language without having stumbling and bumbling. They're coming straight out with it and know exactly where they want to take it. And I think if we're able to now work on, Harold, pointing young people in the right directions, getting them off the street, showing them some opportunities of growth, showing them some opportunities that how they can also affect other people's lives, not just by being in the street, by being doing some other things that will help us carry ourselves in a way that is respectable and in a way as we're teaching people the right way. And that's what we want to work on as we grow on that, Harold.
I think that's a great place to end this conversation. Curtis Simons, I really appreciate you taking some time with us. Congratulations on Hbcugo. It is already up. You can see it, and it's also on all of the social media platforms as well. Hopefully, we will see some growth with this, and not just football, but all of the sports, as you said, and
No question.
and to continue to do it for the culture. Again, Curtis, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to, just also to your boss, Sean, for helping put this together, and to my person, Shannon Henderson, who does all the behind the scenes work. I just want to really, I want to thank them for putting us together and giving me the opportunity to try to tell. And just for your listening audience out there, I just want to echo one thing. I just need to have people understand that we're just trying to grow a brand that I think can really be something that you'll be proud of. So please come out and support us. That's all I ask. Thank you, Harold.
We will continue to watch. That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, July 26th. For News Director Renee Nash, reporters Millette Green, Vermonte Bryant, producer Candace Atkins Wilson, I'm Harold Fisher. Good night and have a wonderful